Tax rises, higher energy bills and spiralling inflation. Even with so much focus on the terrible events in Ukraine, the cost of living crisis remains one of the biggest headaches for Boris Johnson's government. On Wednesday, the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, will deliver his spring statement, one of the two major set pieces of the year, with pressure growing for him to do more to ease the squeeze on household budgets. So what is the spring statement and what should we expect the Chancellor to deliver? Well, the first thing to say is that this is not a budget. The big decisions on tax and spending changes tend to come in the autumn. That said, there will still be some important announcements. First, the Chancellor will update Parliament and the country on the health of the economy, setting out the latest economic and fiscal forecasts from the Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR. On this, there is likely to be some good news. Public borrowing is on course to be significantly lower than the OBR predicted last October. At the same time, his plan to freeze income tax thresholds from this April is likely to deliver a much bigger tax windfall than he expected, maybe as much as £12.5 billion a year, according to the think tank, the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Now, some Tory MPs, as well as Labour, are arguing that the Chancellor should use this new headroom to either cut taxes or provide more support for those facing higher energy bills and living costs. The second big announcement to come will be the OBR's view on inflation. Prices are already at a 30-year high, with inflation in January at 5.5%. Last week, the Bank of England predicted inflation could rise to 8% in June and may even hit double digits later this year, unless there is a slowdown in the rise in energy prices. With the war still raging in Ukraine and Western nations weighing ever tougher sanctions on Russia to strangle its economy, that's unlikely to happen anytime soon. Which brings us to the third big part of Mr. Sunak's statement. Will he come up with any new support for struggling households? Now remember, the Chancellor announced a £9 billion package of support in February to take the sting out of the rise in the energy price cap, which will increase to nearly £2,000 a year next month. But many MPs now want him to go further, something he hinted he might do over the past few days.
I have enormous sympathy for what people are going through at the moment, and that's why we'll always be there to help make a difference where we can.
Now, he could dust off the giveaway Chancellor routine once again and provide yet more grants and rebates to ease the pain of rising fuel bills. But it looks like he might wait until the autumn for that, when the energy price cap could soar again. Another option would be to slash fuel duty by perhaps 5p a litre to try and reduce the cost of petrol and diesel, which have really shot up following the Ukraine crisis. The Netherlands, Ireland and France have already done this, and there has to be a chance Britain will now follow suit. And what about abandoning the imminent rise in national insurance, which will go up by 1.25 percentage points in April? Well, that looks like a non-starter, with ministers repeatedly insisting that the new health and social care levy is desperately needed to clear the COVID backlog. The threshold at which national insurance kicks in could be raised, and there is some speculation that there might be more support for people on benefits and with childcare. For the Chancellor, the politics of all this is extremely difficult. Rishi Sunak had hoped that having spent £400 billion on propping up the country and the economy during the COVID pandemic, he would be able to start repairing the public finances ahead of offering tax cuts just before the general election in 2024. Well, war in Ukraine and the sharp rise in the cost of living have changed all that. And the question Mr. Sunak must answer on Wednesday is whether, amongst growing angst with the public and in Parliament, he can afford not to loosen the purse strings once again.